have a few things that I'm interested in, but I definitely do aspire to be a writer. I've gotten a lot of writing done this year with the program, which is really nice, and I got to win a Scholastic Award with the program, which was lovely. I got involved in Girls Right Now when I was researching writing programs in New York online. What really appealed to me about this one is that you get to have a personal relationship with a specific writer, and that was really appealing to me, so I applied for it.
Having a one-on-one relationship with someone who can help you, there's nothing like it. It's the ideal. Just having the outlook that this is something that's available to you to do, that it isn't outlandish to think that you might become a writer or be a writer or have your work taken seriously, is a wonderful thing, and the earlier the better. Do you consider yourself a feminist?
Well, I think my ideal situation, like my philosophy is that my ideal situation would be one in which gender were never discussed at all. And I think maybe I have this sense that to be a feminist is to think about women specifically and wanting to empower women specifically. And I don't know, I think maybe I would identify more with that if I were more familiar with seeing, like myself seeing specific instances of women being lesser. Mm-hmm. But I think it's not as though I have this sort of sense of intellectual inferiority all the time. And I guess I'm even sort of insulted when my gender is ever brought up at all in intellectual conversations. So I think that kind of doesn't make me a feminist, because maybe on a certain subconscious level I am ashamed of being female or something. But I think just not talking about gender is what makes me the most comfortable, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful ideal.
Yeah.
It does sound, to me, with my experience, kind of utopian, because it's so out there, just in the way that we dress differently, and but doing away with gender awareness, I think that would be a wonderful thing in some ideal future. So what about the word feminism?
The word feminism.
Feminist. I mean, is you one of the do you think of the F word as something you don't want to be associated with?
I mean, to a certain extent, honestly, yeah. I think people I think it does make people uncomfortable, which is fascinating. I think some of the ideas of feminism, if you talk about the ideas of feminism, people would certainly not disagree with them. But if you talk about them in a feminist context, I think people feel that you're being overly aggressive. It's interesting. It's sort of like it's more negative. It's like there's a condemnation of anti-feminism, but there's not an affirmation of feminism itself. And there's this sort of sense that, again, because I'm in a very female-dominated atmosphere, women very much dominate the atmosphere in general, so we don't feel the need to assert ourselves very much. So we sort of think of sexism as being not part of the world that we live in, which is obviously not true, but because we think of it that way, when someone brings up feminism specifically, we sort of feel that it's unnecessary.
Of course, now, as you say, you're in a certain environment.
Right, I'm not a perfect sample. No.
Well, no, everybody's a perfect sample of their experience, but your experience will change when you get out in the world.
Yeah.
As you said earlier, it's hard. Women are more educated, but it's harder for them to get jobs.
Yeah.
So eventually, some aspects of the unfairness of it all might penetrate your experience, and I hope not, but it might happen. You know, I think that the whole thing about the word is so interesting, because in the 19th century, when that movement to get the vote first arose, the word feminism was shocking and sexy and revolutionary.
Yeah.
And then gradually it became tainted. And then until it had an image of just, I think the image was Susan B. Anthony's face, which was a kind of hatchet-faced.
Yeah.
And it became sexless.
Smashing pubs with axes.
And who wanted to be associated with that negative, sexless, school marm attitude? So it became an ugly word. And then when the women's movement began again in the 1960s, it became again a very sexy, revolutionary, exciting word. And people wanted to flock around it. Maybe in part not even because of the ideas, but because of the aura. But again, after a while, and it became tainted again. And now it may come back, I don't know. But if you look at any group that has been stigmatized, you find a discomfort with whatever name is being used. Like take African Americans. They were once called African Americans, then they were called by themselves. I mean, they asserted themselves to be, as they have recently, African Americans, Negro, Black, people of color. There's a cycle, and as soon, but it doesn't change the stigma. So the word is new. When the word is new, it doesn't have the stigma. But as time goes by, it acquires it, and they have to have a new name. And the same, I think, is true with women. The stigma is about being female, rather than being feminist.
And I think to a certain extent, people, I don't know, maybe, I mean, just speaking about my experience, I think people, certainly my age, think of feminism as like their parents. Like that's what it is.
Of course.
It's the things that you grew up with, and it's the annoying political correctness you were subjected to in kindergarten. And I think there's a certain sense that one of the reasons it's not sexy and exciting to young people is that they're familiar with it to a certain extent. Like it's something that it's sort of counterintuitive because young people grow up with ideas of feminism like from a really early age. They think of feminism the way that you think of like all the other annoying lessons that you're taught as a 6-year-old.
Absolutely.
Even though you certainly agree with feminism and you agree with things like do unto others as you would have them do it, like, you know, these things that you're told, you sort of want to rebel against them because they've become a norm. Which is interesting. It is a very cyclical process.